we've started.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nick Adams-King. I'm the leader and executive member for Hampshire 2050 and Corporate Services here at Hampshire County Council. Welcome to my decision day this afternoon on the 6th of March. With the exception of consideration of matters which are confidential or exempt, this decision day is currently being broadcast live on YouTube via the County Council website. So I'd like to welcome my colleague, Councillor Zoe Huggins, who's my fellow cabinet member in Hampshire 2050, and Councillor Jonathan Glenn and Councillor Rod Cooper, the chair and vice chair of the Hampshire 2050 Select Committee. And thanks to them for joining, because they've had a very short lunch break from the end of the committee meeting before we've started now. So got that. Also invited our opposition spokesman, Councillor Adrian Collett for the Liberal Democrats, and Councillor Malcolm Wallace, who is the independent group spokesman. Now, I know I can't see that Adrian's on the call, and I know that Malcolm is planning to join, but was in a different meeting before this one, so he may well not be here as yet. We've also got apologies from the deputy leader, Councillor Jan Warwick, so she's not here this afternoon. So we've got a number of different decisions to make, but first of all, we've got a deputation, and that's from Mr. Jones in relation to item 1, which is the bus grant, the bus service improvement plan funding. Stu, thank you very much for coming along. You have 10 minutes to make your deputation if you would like, and we are all ears when you are ready to start. So.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and good afternoon, councillors. Hopefully I won't take anything like 10 minutes, and I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. So thank you and good afternoon. My name is Stuart Jones. I'm a member of the Hampshire Enhanced Partnership Forum. So I'd like to speak, as I said, this afternoon on the BSIP funding. Of course, the BSIP was approved in late 2024, but the funding items are new. So I think as part of my role as a critical friend to the BSIP process, the Enhanced Partnership process, I want to give my views through that as to the funding items. And again, to try and keep it as short and succinct as possible. I'd like to consider 3 points that I'll raise as you finalise the funding. So the 14 million grant is welcome, and it's good to see Hampshire getting a significant increase on the last allowance. But I'm hoping it's possible, and I expect it will be possible, to incorporate these adjustments that I'm going to propose, and they are not whole-scale revisions. I hope at least you consider it as a development of the funding plan, a refinement, or taking feedback from the community, from the EP forum that's obviously not had a chance to review and input into these items prior to this meeting. So I felt it was appropriate for me to come along today to give you my view as an individual member of the EP forum in feedback on the items being presented to you. So I think also I believe that these 3 points would give you better value for money. It would give you some opportunity to deliver to a faster timescale and with benefit to a wider group of residents. So I'm encouraging you to think about go better, go faster, and go wider, which will be some themes that I'll come on to in the 3 points. The first point, the plan, I strongly believe the plan needs more focus on supporting communities to develop demand surveys. Now, neither you or I want to see money spent on empty buses running around. And of course, I understand the operators and Hampshire Bus Team will have a view on demand and where services are likely to be run to the best effect, and also with the best social need as well. It's not just about chasing the demand where the people are. These are key points in my area in the Winchester Southern parishes, where we have a lot of development, but also very tricky routing, and also the need to build up demand and encourage demand as much as say the people are here, let the buses follow the people. That's not what this needs to be about, because of the need to understand and promote the development and promote the modal shift, which is absolutely part of your LTP4. So what I'm encouraging is, as well as the welcome move to support communities to buy, capital funding for buses, please give some measure to improve the surveys that you run through the BSIP process and widen those surveys to something which is more aligned to a unmet demand survey not just the survey of people who run or who actually participate on the buses, because this is key. And the only thing it can do possibly for you, I encourage you, councillors, you will have more data on which to make sure you are confident you're spending money wisely. If it's just a conversation between you and the operators, it's a bit of a kind of closed chamber of your own thoughts. The more you can get to the communities, the more you can get the communities to either step up and say, if you introduce this, we will use it. You have yourselves the reassurance that you've consulted the community and you've really got the best view from the community now to as to why you're running those buses, why you're spending the money in that area. So that's my first point. Unmet demand surveys, please consider introducing them as part of the BSIP process and encourage and help communities to do that. The second thing is the use of BSIP money to help your bus strategy team, your bus teams, to work and deliver some of the outputs they need harder and better and more effectively. Because obviously there have been some losses in that team, I understand. But also, as we sit in the EP forum, we're seeing a kind of progress report of where the progress on these bus route improvement plans, which are obviously bus route specific, so that gives you the clarity of why you would spend money, where the routing would go, what the improvements are. Now, at the last EP forum, we were given a list that shows the progress on these bus route improvement plans. Frankly, it's just not getting there. I mean, I'm on the 69 route. We've possibly waited 18 months and we're still seeing that huge backlog. There's over 2/3 of these bus route improvement plans still need to be delivered. So I'm encouraging you, help yourselves, help us, help yourselves to put some money from the BSIP funding to get more resources, more augmentation, whatever it needs, to be able to go, okay, here is a faster route to get these backlog of BRIPs, or whatever they're called, the bus route improvement plans, done and out there for consultation. It can only, again, help to provide the clarity of, here's the plan, here's why we're spending the money. At the minute, you're actually proposing this funding plan to spend money when there's over half of the bus route improvement plan still to be done. Now that feels as though it gives you as councillors a risk that you haven't got a route plan as to how this money could best be spent. So please use some money in the augmentation of your bus strategy team to get these route improvement plans done. The last part, retendering, the third point. I understand it was important to do this, but you've allowed for inflation in the uplift and given obviously the operators a view of what the extra headroom in the funding is that you'll consider when you retender these bus routes, I think in the middle of this year. So I understand the plans. Yeah. So obviously, in a sense of a negotiation, that obviously gives the bus operators a view of, we're here and we've allowed nearly £1 million for the increase, when we come to retender. For that, please ensure that the operators have to show clear additional benefit and don't have the opportunity to just say, well, look, prices have gone up. Please, as good procurement practice, I'd encourage you, please somehow find a way. Just please make sure that they don't just soak up the kind of the increase, claiming that's all inflation. I'd encourage you to find some way through the procurement process to get extra value, extra benefit for that additional money, not just soak it up in inflation rises. And linked to that, the retendering, please, in your plan, please consider as you retender, please don't retender the same service pattern if the route needs improvement. I'm thinking here of the 49 service. It is a best that could be done at the time service, given the exit of Zelabus. But please, through the retendering, please take the opportunity to look for improvements. Otherwise, the like for like is going to continue to have the same service, probably at a higher cost, and that benefits nobody. Those are my 3 points under the go better, go faster, go wider themes that I used earlier. I believe they are evolutionary. They're not rip it all up. So please consider how you might be able to incorporate these into the BSIP funding that you're putting forward today. Thank you very much.
Mr. Jones, Stuart, thank you so much. That was really helpful. If you'd like to hang on, what we're going to do is to get the team to introduce the item for you, for us all. And so, Gary, over to you to introduce the item, and perhaps with you and Andrew, you could let us know the different ideas that Mr. Jones has put forward. You know, to what extent can we take those into account in the plans that we've got, and so that where they fit into what we're planning to do as possible as we can.
Leader, sorry, it's Louise. Could I just interrupt? I think Councillor Wallace is now on the call, so if you want to take his deputation first, or
no, sorry, Councillor Wallace was just keen to hear the item. Louise, okay. Sorry. Yeah, so Malcolm's got some things to say in a moment. So if we ask Andrew and Gary to introduce it, and then we can do our normal thing of a bit of debate and so on from there. Sorry.
Thank you, Leader, and it's going to be very short for me because I'm going to pass to Frank and Andrew to cover the report. What we'll endeavour to do within that is pick up some reflections on what Mr. Jones has said and can build that into the discussion afterwards. So, Frank, over to you.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Chair. First off, just a very high summary. This is a report which is seeking to accept £13 million worth of grant funding. Within the report, we have given an indicative areas of spend. So Stuart's questions about is it flexible? Yes, it is, and we can definitely take into account the points that you've raised through that. The other thing to note is it's both capital and revenue, and the details of the schemes the details of the schemes that we would consider being provisionally for that funding are listed in the report. The schemes that we've come up with have been through what's a legal enhanced partnership. This is something which is a contractual arrangement with bus operators and other parties, and it has also followed formal consultation through our local bus forums, of which Stuart will know all about. And within those forums, we include local county councillors, district councillors, and a whole range of people, local community groups, etc. So a lot of this, a lot of the measures that we're proposing to do have been widely engaged. I won't say too much more about the report, but I think it is important for members to note the context within which this funding comes forward. Firstly, this comes forward as an annual settlement, and it's followed a prolonged multi-year programme of investment by the County Council and the government to basically help buses recover from both the COVID pandemic and then through world events that have seen inflation affect the bus sector significantly, both in driver wages, fuel costs, etc. We're actually facing a significant economic shock in this sector. So this funding is actually part of a prolonged package to try and resolve those issues and ensure that we have a competitive bus sector that offers real choice to the residents of Hampshire going forward. There was a fear at one point that the bus network might reduce by as much as 60% in light of those shocks, and it is through the efforts and investments that have taken place historically and now in this bus service improvement plan that we're weathering those shocks and coming out the other end. And it looks like if we get continued investment from government in future years, that we'll be able to build back better than we actually done before the pandemic. So it's a really good news story in that respect, and I don't want that to go unnoticed. The other factor is that the bus operators who are part of the enhanced partnership are firmly on board. They see the efforts that Hampshire's doing, and they have invested significantly in local bus services, new bus fleets, of which we recently announced the 62 new zero emission buses in Fareham and Gosport. So on that basis, I commend the report to members and encourage the conversation that follows.
Frank, thank you so much for that. I'm pretty sure I just saw that also both Adrian and Malcolm are also online, and along with Jonathan and Rod. So everyone's now here, which is a good thing. Just a word for us when we're talking about these various issues. Just whilst I'm not going to stop you talking about buses in your own areas, just to remind you that we're all here to talk about the generality of this, as our various representatives for the different positions we hold. And so it might well not be that if anyone wants to talk about a particular bus route, we might not be able to answer that here, and we'll need to get back to you if that turns out to be the case. So I'm going to ask Adrian first for some comments, and then Malcolm.
Okay, thank you, Nick, and apologies for being a few minutes late. I had to drive home from the last meeting and just came straight in the door. I didn't even take my jacket off. I was sorry to miss Stuart's deputation, because I'm sure I would have agreed with a lot of what he had to say. One of the points that I've made before at your meetings when we're considering BSIP funding is that it does, what we're using it for, does some very good things in terms of ensuring the viability of existing services and keeping modal shift going in the right direction in that respect, and it will look good from a statistical point of view. What we're not succeeding in doing is plugging the gaps where the services don't exist that people desperately need. And I wanted to flag up that I recognise there are choices to be made here, but we need to find ways of plugging the gaps where existing services. It's all very well getting good statistics about the number of people using buses, but if all we're doing is increasing the frequency on routes that people already have a choice on, then that's not quite such an achievement as it might appear on paper. Having said that, modal shift is good. More people on our buses is a good thing, and fewer people needing to drive cars. I've got no problem with any of that, but it's the gaps that worry me. Thank you, Chairman.
Super, thanks. I think there's to a degree, some of that is constrained by the limitations of the DFT funding requirements and the conditions and their expectations, isn't it, in terms of being able to, we can only use the BSIP funding, I think, to pump prime new routes rather than fill gaps where we know them not to be viable. Am I right in thinking that, Andrew?
Yes, that's right, Leader. The BSIP funding is all about growing the commercial network. It's that co-investment with the bus operators to improve the strong network. I think in terms of one of Councillor Collett's points about filling the gaps, I think we've responded to that. We've listened to the consultation responses, and we've listened to the likes of Stuart through the Enhanced Partnership Forum, and that's why this time we've got a proposal within the funding to allow communities to in effect fill their own gaps. We're putting forward both within the capital amount of money and within the revenue funding the ability for, there's a pot of funding in there for communities, whether it's parish councils, town councils, community groups, existing community transport operators, to come forward with proposals that we can receive, and then it's about filling those gaps themselves. It's using the existing community transport self-help toolkit that we have as a county council, which in effect talks people through how to do the unmet demand that Stuart was talking about, those surveys. It shows people how to measure what the demand could be in their local communities and how to establish a transport service that can fill gaps that wouldn't be commercially viable for a bus operator to run those services. So that's why that proposal is within this report.
Super, thanks. And I think there's a very good example of that that I can give you in a minute, actually, Adrian, of how that kind of works. But certainly hear your concern around it. It's just unfortunately some of the constraints that we have don't allow us quite to do all that you'd wish. Malcolm.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, fine.
Super. So obviously this funding is really welcome, and I think we're all supportive of that. And it's great to hear from the team that the bus levels have returned to pre-COVID, and congrats should go to the team for that. However, we do need to recognise where we are as a county. We are in the lowest 10% of local authorities for bus trips per person. and approximately half that of other rural counties such as Dorset, Wiltshire and Sussex. So we might be back to pre-COVID levels, which is great, but we are quite a long way behind other areas, and so we've got a challenge in front of us, and hopefully we can use this funding to help us address that. Whether that's in the rural communities where the funding's where bus journeys have gone completely. I was reading the bit that the government put out about this funding, and it specified that the funding is to enhance popular routes, protect rural services, and increase bus use for shopping, socialising, commuting, and to prevent service reductions on at-risk routes. So I think, you know, hopefully that's all built into the proposals that are coming forward. So there's two areas that I really wanted to kind of question on. So other councillors might also have been contacted, but I've been contacted by a disability group who are obviously concerned. As part of the SP25, we cut some funding for disability groups to get on the buses before 9:30. I haven't had a chance to double check the numbers, but I believe that was around 75k that it benefited the council for. In this latest pot of funding, we've got an equivalent amount, 75k, which is targeted towards disability awareness initiatives. Now, frankly, speaking to the people I've been speaking to, they would prefer to be allowed to get on the bus before 9:30 rather than have disability awareness initiatives. So perhaps that might be something we could look at, whether that funding could be reallocated to that. The second question is really around bus availability. Obviously, you know, funding has been allocated, and this is picking up a kind of a point that Stuart was making. Funding has been allocated largely by Hampshire in consultation with the local bus companies, and there are concerns that we're not getting enough of the users to take into account. I'm afraid, Leader, I'm going to use an example, but it is just an example, and it should be applicable to the wider area. So, for example, in Whiteley, we've got a population of approaching 10,000 residents, but only one bus service, which at current usage rates is at risk of stopping before the new secondary school opens. It's not being used very well. Now, the town council have just completed a survey. People really care about their buses. Town council just completed a survey of local residents, which identified opportunities for improving the service. It got a reasonably high response, about 250 people responding, over 250 people. And in parallel, the Solent Business Park, which sits in there, carried out their own survey, which received almost 1,000 responses. Now, how can, so I guess, you know, how are we including all of that kind of, there is a real desire out there for people to get to, they want buses. We can see that. But they're struggling to work out how to engage properly with the council so that we get them there. There is a statement on paragraph 43 about continued engagement with stakeholders, and I am struggling with that a little bit myself. I don't know if it's just me, but I managed to wangle my way onto one of the stakeholder forums about 2 years ago, and I haven't heard anything about any of them ever since. So I haven't been on a stakeholder forum. I did ask to be invited to subsequent ones, and I haven't heard anything. Maybe there haven't been them. I don't know. But it's not about me. It's really about how we get the voices of our residents, our businesses, and parish and town councils to how we get their voices into this so that we make the right decisions with the limited funding we've got, so we really deliver value with that money. Thank you.
Super, thanks, Malcolm. Now, let me, I don't know whether there's quite a lot in there. The one thing I would say is that I think all of us have been contacted by people who have realised that there are the challenges now with the bus passes for disabled people and for their carers. and the changes that were agreed actually last October and were consulted upon back then, and that creates a bit of a challenge for us. And indeed, as part of that, we did alter those to reflect the concerns that were raised at that point. But it's not actually something that anybody that is in this forum today has any direct responsibility for. So I think the first thing to say is let's get you a separate answer on that one from the team who are dealing with it, who are in universal services. So we can do that part for you first. The other aspects around sort of protection of routes and protection of routes that are currently unviable but might become so in the future. I don't know. Is there anything that the officer would like to kind of comment upon to help Malcolm with answers to that, or is that something that we would wish to come back to him later, Frank?
I think the first thing to say, Nick, is that the conditions of the funding are quite strict in that if we've cut a service, this cannot be used to then refund that service this way. So that's just simply out of scope of this funding in this case. The other thing to bear in mind is that in relation to the 75,000 mentioned, there's an issue of one-off funding in this case. So if we were to refund 75k for 1 year, we'd have to then continue to do it thereon and thereafter forever and so forth. And that's kind of causes the problem and why we're looking more to go for the proposal that we have on the table at the moment. The other question from Councillor Wallace was related to the forum and how to get onto it and how we get communities in there so that we can hear their voices. And I think Andrew might be able to talk a bit more about how we can get community representation on there if people feel they're left behind. Andrew, do you be able to just cover that bit?
Yeah, we run throughout the year, we run a series of passenger transport forums, and we have a whole range of people in the audience for those, whether it's town councils, parish councils, district councils, transport operators, county councillors, and there's an opportunity through those to feedback about whether it's rural transport issues, whether it's real-time information, and that feedback is what's driven quite a lot of what's in this BSIP report today, and that's why there's quite a lot in there about rural areas, about there's a fund there for new bus shelters for parish and town councils, there's a fund for real-time information for parish and town councils to come forward and tell us where they want to see those improvements delivered. So it feels to me as though those are quite successful. We usually have upwards of 60, 70 attendees at those forums. So we do get quite a lot of feedback that has gone into this report. Similarly, the Enhanced Partnership Forum that Stuart Jones sits on, there's a lot of influence from that group into how this report has panned out today. So it feels to me as though we are listening and reacting to those calls. It is difficult, Councillor Wallace, around, you mentioned Whiteley in particular. We've got to make a judgment call together with the bus operators about what is going to be viable in terms of a bus service in the long term. And if we don't see a commercial case and the operators don't see a commercial case, we can't use BSIP money to enhance the service at Whiteley, for example. And that in the example of Whiteley, it's because people are travelling from multiple different destinations to get into Whiteley. It's not where public transport works really well, where you've got a lot of people going to one common destination from one general area. People are coming all over from Whiteley, and that's why it's difficult to provide a commercially viable bus service there, for example. That's not to say that we're not looking at it. We're very well aware of the Whiteley issues, and we're working to see what can be done with the operators. But at the moment, the operators can't see a commercial case for expanding that network.
May I come back on one point?
Yeah, do.
Just on the passenger transport forum, 60 people sounds like a reasonable amount, but then actually, if you look just at my division, I've got 12 parish councils. I could probably get you 60 people just from my division who would be interested enough to turn up to a meeting on buses if we're advertising it. So when you scale that up across the county, that's a lot of people who are interested in this. Looking at it the other way, 60 people, you've got less than one person per division, and divisions, can be really big. I think, we can't answer it today, and I'm not asking you to, but perhaps there is something we need to look at there about how we get more involvement from the wider community. Thank you.
And I'm sure it's something that we can take away, and if anything, you know, if we are holding the customer transport for us, perhaps we can make sure that you are kind of brought into the loop of when they're being held, you know, particularly those in your patch and in Winchester, which would probably link you in, I guess, to Stuart in the sense of talking about the southern parishes of Winchester districts as well. Jonathan, you're next.
Yeah, thank you very much. Look, I was considering not speaking. I just want to say well done, Stuart. I liked his deputation on go faster, go better, go wider. That's a lovely way to sum it up. I hope that in the future officers will take that on board when we're looking at future bus services. The unmet demand is an interesting one, because how do we go about consulting people who have got unmet demands? Can someone tell me how we do it? That's my question.
Who'd like to answer the unmet demand question, Andrew? Oh, you muted though, sorry.
Sorry, okay, thanks, Councillor Glenn. Yeah, we've made some inroads into that. As part, when we set out on this journey with the bus service improvement plan, one of the consultation strands of work that we carried out was to hold some focus groups. And we had a focus group with regular bus users, frequent bus users. We had a focus group with people who use the bus occasionally, and then we had one group with people who simply don't use the buses at all because they didn't feel they were relevant to their lives. So that was how we started to make some inroads. We've done some work through the Hampshire Perspectives group, and we've done surveys and had literally hundreds of responses from people about what they want to see from for example, from their local bus stop, from their local bus service. But we do passenger focus. There's a national group called Passenger Focus, and they are regular bus users that we survey. We do about 1,000 surveys every year through Passenger Focus. But you're right, those are the people who are existing bus passengers. We can look at doing more. We can always look at doing more through the enhanced partnership governance to identify where that unmet need might be. It might be that if local communities want to take that on themselves, that they can ask for some of the money that we've put aside within this report to help themselves and use that transport self-help toolkit and develop their own proposals. If that's coming from the ground upwards, that may well be more successful than anything that we could do. So quite happy to take that on and listen to what the communities want from their local transport service.
Okay, but that's very helpful. Look, thanks very much.
I'm doing it now, aren't I? Adrian, you just, in case you wanted to jump back in.
Yes, if you don't mind, on this issue of how do you assess demand, my own neck of the woods, Yateley, used to have a number 3 bus that ran twice an hour, and it was poorly used. But Stagecoach found their confidence and increased the frequency, and now it's 4 times an hour, and every single bus has more people on it than the 2 buses per hour used to between them. The service was put on, the frequency was increased, and it worked. And now there's no way Stagecoach would take that off because it's a good money earner for them. Now, we've been trying to persuade Stagecoach to connect through to Fleet. And I know I'm getting into details here, Nick, and I'm not expecting answers on that. But the point I'm making is we can see more of a market for the connection between Yateley and Fleet than there ever was for the number 3 route. But Stagecoach just don't want to know. And things like running a minibus or shared taxis or anything like that won't cut the mustard, not for the volume of people that would want to use this. So a group called Buses in Fleet put up a website and said, if you're interested in using a service like this, let us know. And they got thousands of people expressing an interest in using the service. Yet we, Hampshire County Council, said to them, well, that has no credibility. I'm not interested in that. Go away and think again. So it's a very frustrating process, and I do understand the limitations of resources that our officers have to work with. I'm not criticizing them for that, but I think the idea that you can build up evidence of use and then it will get you anywhere is a very frustrating process at the moment.
Understood. I mean, part of the challenge of this is that we've got a really good outcome with this. However, we don't have any certainty, I think, for subsequent years, and so creating things that work now, we've got to be sure that they'll be able to move forward. Zoe, you've not had a chance to come in. I don't know whether you wanted to contribute.
Yeah, no, not much. I've listened, and I think what I'm hearing from the debate is that we all obviously welcome the funding, and it is this capturing that benefit of this moment in time. And what I'm hearing from officers is, you know, we're in a moment of time that we can continue to build on this and build better. I think, Frank, was the comment that you made, but also taking on board Mr. Jones, as I think Frank, you said that you can be flexible and listen to that. And Andrew, you obviously also said that we can continue to have that dialogue with those stakeholders. And I think what I've heard through this debate is that we recognise and welcome the funding, and actually there's still some work to continue to be done. And I think, you know, we all understand that when we talk about connectivity or transport, you know, this is about many elements of whether or not it's connecting communities for our economy, for learning, but obviously for the benefit of the environment as well. So yeah, thank you.
Super, thanks. Now, just before I wrap up, can I just say, Stuart, normally we wouldn't allow a deputy to speak again, having made the deputation, but you were indicating you wanted to say a couple of things as we went through. So just very quickly, do you have anything that you'd just like to add to kind of to wrap up, and then I can close the item down.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I do appreciate, you know, this is unusual for a deputy to be allowed to speak again, so I do appreciate it. But obviously my name, as it were, and particularly in a sense, not just one individual, but the EP forum was referenced a couple of times in that. So just very briefly, in 1 minute, I just wanted to kind of give councillors a little bit of perspective on that. Yes, look, let's put our hands up. We are a kind of self-selected group of interested bus users willing to give their time on a nice sunny afternoon to make representations to Hampshire, but that's kind of what we're about. We are part of the community, but we're in that group. I do fear sometimes that there's a lot of, and Mr. Baxter, you mentioned it as well, you know, there's a lot of reference back, and it feels a lot of weight to be able to say, yes, the community has been consulted because the EP forum is part of the group, and therefore. We are 3 or 4 individual bus users who have the interest and some of the background knowledge to make a case and to work, I think, Andrew, hopefully you'd agree, really constructively, you know, as a critical friend, keep coming back to both sides of that argument, critical friend within the EP forum as part of the EP structure. So that's the kind of positives. I would please encourage councillors to reflect. If you look at Wiltshire's EP forum, EP structure, it's pretty similar. So you're not kind of miles away. But on their BSIP, as far as I understand it, they have direct representation, not just from the passenger transport forums, but in those EP development meetings where the forum's consulted, they have a representative of, if you like, the wider parishes and the wider community and the wider authorities. That, I'll say, is not present in Hampshire. And I know, Andrew, you know, I think it would actually be quite onerous to try and get a full Hampshire bus users community and have some kind of single or few representatives of that in that meeting. That's a very pointy pyramid, as Malcolm Wallace, you said. You know, you've got a large number of people and you're trying to filter all of the views from all of the individual representatives. But I think at least somehow, please try and get, you know, at minimum, representatives from the 6 groups, the 6 districts, to try and get some consensus view. Push it back on them. You know, okay. Be a bit pokey to say, look, this is your community. You organise yourselves to provide us a unified voice as to what works for you. So, you know, I think there's a good, and I just wanted to say, EP Forum as it stands is not as representative as I think, you know, you might hope it is in terms of consultations. I just encourage you to build it up and do more within that consultation. Thank you.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And to reassure you, I know that Zoe and my colleague Lulu Bauman, who is the chair of the EP Forum, is actually watching this. She sent me a couple of messages while we've been sat here to say that she's listening to your deputation and hearing that as well. We face quite a bit of change ahead of us because devolution will begin to change the structure of all of this a little bit for us as well. But it's certainly worth having that conversation to go ahead. And this is a really good piece of news for Hampshire in terms of the amount of money that we've been given and the opportunities that we have to enable us to take this forward. So a really positive thing for us, and the amount of money should support many of the initiatives that I know that we are all keen to deliver. The one thing I would say is that I'm a great advocate for that capital fund for communities to bring their bus services forward, because one of the first things that I had to do as a cabinet member for Hampshire was to cut the bus services, the final bus services that ran through my division and through my own village. And the local parish councils have got together and they've created and they've worked with an existing community bus company in Mottisfont to expand its services. And it's working really well for everybody. And so that is an excellent model for our rural areas. And I commend the Mottisfont and Abridge bus because it does a really great job. And it's something that I think offers us a solution that is probably much more sustainable and actually much more user-friendly than perhaps just having those very large buses that used to run through in an uneconomic and probably unenvironmentally friendly way, rural lanes with only one or two people on them, which was one of the challenges. So to wrap this one up, the recommendations that we have in front of us are in paragraphs 2 to 6, and they're on pages 5 and 6 of the agenda this afternoon. I'm very happy to agree those. Stuart, thank you so much for attending and for joining in. We're going to move on to much more sort of prosaic matters, but it was good to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the time. Thank you.
Okay, so item number 2 now is the community asset transfer policy. That's on pages 25 to 42, and I think it's a Gary and Emma joint production, this one.
Thank you, Leader. It's not me and Emma, it's myself, Rebecca and Tim. So I'm going to hand across to Rebecca and Tim to introduce the report, please.
I'm very sorry, Emma turned up on screen and I thought she was about to talk.
Tim's going to introduce this paper.
Yeah.
So in summary, community asset transfer is the process where publicly owned land and buildings are transferred to community organisations. This report sets out the formal process for considering when a council-owned asset might be suitable for disposal in this way, and also to provide direction and transparency for all parties involved in any such transfer on how this will be managed. So the paper's in 2 parts. The first part sets out the rationale for the process, and the protocol itself is in the appendix.
Super, thanks so much, Tim. Right, so comments, colleagues. Adrian, do you have a view on this one?
Yes, thank you very much. One of my colleagues got in touch with me about this paper to say Donald Trump would be proud. It's very transactional. It's about making money out of the assets rather than thinking about the community in terms of its direction of travel. So I had a very careful look at it, and it does seem to be creating straitjackets where they don't exist at the moment. And I notice in paragraph 23, it says the main principle is that the financial consideration will take precedence when considering any asset transfer. That doesn't sound like being very supportive of community organisations. They would only be helped if the finances stack up for us. So I'd like some reassurance that I've misread the paper.
I can come back on that. The reason for financial precedence being the primary sort of reason for considering it is because the council consider how it uses these assets to support the public. If that funding can be used as a result of disposing the asset to support other council priority activities, then that should be the precedence. If we cannot achieve sort of that financial return, that achieves the best effect for the council, then that disposal through a community asset transfer is considered the next best process.
Yeah, if I may come back on that, thank you for that explanation. The community group, if I can use that term as a collective term, that's providing effectively services for the community, from what you're saying, comes second to whether we could sell it and make some money out of it and put it in our capital reserves, or if we could find something else we could use the facility for. Is that what you're saying?
Not quite. I think what I'm saying is that if the council can achieve a good capital receipt, then it can use that for maximum benefit for the whole county, rather than just supporting an individual group that would benefit from the asset transfer. So it gives the organisation greater flexibility to use that resource in the most effective way, rather than just targeting a single group. I think Gary might add something to that.
Yeah, Gary wishes to come in here.
It was just, I think, Councillor Collett, to explain what Tim's just in a slightly different form of words. I think it's that principle of the financial return being the only like-for-like comparator around all of the public value that we discharge as an organisation. And I think the way Tim's described it in terms of the public value that is required in terms of any of our revenue or capital budgets, we need to, we're constantly taking decisions around appraising and the decisions that we will have to take based on finance resources. So that's the basis of that assessment. But I think, Councillor Collett, when you also read the paper in the round, I know you picked on that point around the financial imperative. Throughout the paper as well is weaved in terms of that kind of wider assessment, particularly through the references to EOIs as well within that paper, that rounded assessment does take place, and that is absolutely baked into the policy. I think it's paragraph 28 is where all of that obliged best value is articulated.
Well, I will turn to that and read it again. Thank you. I'm not unaware of our financial situation, the crisis we face, obviously, but equally I don't want us throwing babies out with bathwater. Thank you.
No, but I think, I mean, the example I'll give you, Adrian, is just to say that the suggestion that you just made is that we would sell things in order just to kind of put money into capital reserves where they would sit. And the fact is that we are not doing that. We are using our capital reserves to invest in various facilities that enable us to manage our revenue pressures better. And the perfect example of that is the construction of the new special educational needs schools that we are putting in place across the piece, not least one of them close to you up in Hart, but also where we are able to use that money to enhance the facilities of some of the other schools to increase their capacity for special educational needs students. And of course, the more the capacity we can provide closer to children's home in that example, it enables, number one, us to reduce the amount of school transport cost we have to bear, but also it's far better for them not to be transported around the county to do that. So it's a win-win in that respect. And that money has to come from somewhere. And if it's the sale of some of the assets that we have, then that to my mind is not so much a matter of selling the family silver. It's selling one item to invest in another that provides sustainability for not only ourselves going forward, but also for the successor councils that may well be down the track after local government reorganisation. So there's a piece there around that. I don't dismiss the fact that we need to offset that against the community benefit and the financial benefit sometimes of assets providing services in other ways that support things better. So there is a balance there to be made. But I don't want people watching or for any of us to think that we're just about selling things to stick money in a reserve that isn't then working for us all, because that's not what we're doing at all. Malcolm, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, partly just to echo some of Adrian's comments. I got a little bit confused when I read this policy. I got to paragraph 13 states that property disposal could be at less than best price. And then I came to paragraph 27, which appeared to say the opposite about how we're going to try and get the most money for anything we sell. And I was left confused as to what it was, what the policy was trying to tell us, to be honest. I wasn't sure, is it based on an LGA template or perhaps I need to read it, a third time, but I was getting confused about what it is what guidance we're giving to people.
So what we're trying to set out is the point at which an asset has less value to the council from a sort of financial point of view, and from being able to dispose it, and we don't need it operationally, and there is an interest from the community in using and acquiring the asset, how we would go through the process of assessing that balance, if you like, between the financial return and the sort of wider community benefits. So the key principle we're setting out is we start with the financial point, because as Gary said, that's a sort of a very clear measure, and then looking at all of the other factors which may affect how we can get rid of the building. There are issues where, as we've set out, the cost of disposal may outweigh the capital receipt you get back. So at that point, it may be better to look at a community asset transfer, for example. So throughout the paper, we've tried to articulate all of those different sort of contexts and reasons, and the protocol itself helps us work through that discussion and that engagement with community interested groups.
Maybe it was just me. I struggled with it, to be honest, and I'm normally quite good with some of these. I read quite a lot of these papers now, but perhaps it was just me.
Malcolm, sorry, Adrian.
Thank you. Just coming back on this and thinking it through, one thing which is missing these days from our agenda papers is items that we used to get for information. And one example of that might be that once this policy becomes operational, that any transactions made under that could be listed and put as an item for information at the end of your agenda or whatever, so that we can see the effect it's having in operation and reassure ourselves that it's working well, which is obviously what we would want it to do. Or if we're worried in any way, we can question it. Obviously, if the delegated powers, as in the recommendations, are just given as they are, we wouldn't know those things. So would that be a way forward, and then we could be more comfortable with this?
Gary?
Thank you, Councillor Collett and Leader. What I'd want to do is take that question away rather than almost commit to a process in a meeting right now. I think Councillor Collett, perfectly reasonable for us to take on board the sentiment of what you're trying to achieve in terms of that greater visibility and transparency, but there will be a number of ways through which we could potentially achieve that. So if members are comfortable, I'd just like to take that away and give it some proper deep thought in terms of how we can achieve that objective in the best way.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Okay, super. Rod and Jonathan, any comment?
No comment. I think we just need to express, just need to be careful when we are disposing of assets and just really look at it carefully would be my only comment.
Super, thanks. And Zoe?
No additional comments. Thank you, Leader.
So I think Adrian, I think we have to take that away and look at the way in which we might be able to phrase that better for you and make it a bit easier to understand. Certainly this is a topic that, as we begin to change the councils around, no doubt people will wish to return to. So it's good that we're beginning to think about this now. The recommendations are in paragraphs 2 and 3 on page 25. They're quite straightforward, really. I'm very happy to approve those, but we will come back to this for you, Adrian, and
thank you. Will we make a note in a minute that we're going to do that so we don't forget it?
No, don't worry, we've got that. I've written it down. Okie dokie. Number 3 is Hampshire Cultural Trust Updated Collections Development Policy 2025-2030. That's why Emma was getting ready.
Thank you.
But Gary's going to. I'm supposed to go to Gary first. Sorry.
No, it's straight to Emma. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, leader. Good afternoon, members. I think all on this call are familiar that Hampshire Cultural Trust manages the museum and arts collection for both Hampshire County Council and Winchester City Council. We as Hampshire County Council require the Cultural Trust to have a collections policy, and they're also required to have one as part of their accreditation. This paper sets out, seeks approval for the future policy from 25 to 2030, and the key changes to the policy are set out in paragraph 26. So that's basically returning full power to the County Council to decide on acquisitions with a delegation to the appropriate assistant director. There's only one change to the paper since it was published, and that's to confirm in paragraph 16 that the proposals were approved by Hampshire Cultural Trust Board, and I think Councillor Huggins was at that meeting on the 21st. But other than that, I'll just direct you to the recommendations at the start of the paper.
Super, thanks very much. Let me do. I'll do my normal round of Adrian first.
Just one comment. The criteria for purchasing new items for the collection in the future are set out in the report. Would that set of criteria be likely to have changed any purchases that have been made in the last 5 years? Are there things that are built that in hindsight we would have said, actually, that's not good use of public money?
I'm not sure. I can't answer that directly because where we don't have that full control, we don't necessarily see everything that comes in. But I certainly think that those things that are strategically important to Hampshire would still be within the scope of this policy and would be accepted, provided that I think what we're very keen on is that we acquire things carefully and thoughtfully, and noting the storage issues around the Cultural Trust, that we're not expanding the collection without giving due regard to what's already in that collection. So, Councillor Collett, I can't answer precisely, but I'm not sure on what changes that would have made in the past.
So this paper isn't reacting to a known problem.
The issue it's reacting to is the fact that storage is limited, and we do need to manage and control how much goes into the collection because it links to cost, and we obviously want the collection to reflect the best that Hampshire County Council wants to retain, and make sure that we're keeping items that are strategically important priorities for Hampshire, and not, for example, duplicates of items that we don't need to keep.
Okay, thank you.
Malcolm.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask why this is being, it states a couple of times in the report, this is being done independently of Winchester City Council. I just wondered why.
It's because we as Hampshire County Council wanted to take back delegation. So at the moment, currently authority to acquire new objects is delegated to Cultural Trust. Hampshire County Council, we've decided we want to take back that control over our own collections. I think Winchester will have their own views about that, but I think they wanted that they hadn't considered it at the same time we had. But there's no particular divergence in our views other than us wanting to have control over the delegated authority to acquire new objects.
Thank you.
Super, thanks. Zoe, did you want to jump in with any comments from the Cultural Trust Board meeting?
Yeah, so as an observer at the meeting, this was presented, and Councillor Collett, a very similar question was asked as well. Is this reactive? What does it look like from previous and future? I will say that it was passed. There was support and understanding for this, and I think the main point of that is the strong partnership that we have with Hampshire Cultural Trust, and the open dialogue of if an asset and I think there is some currently that if there was an asset that was a strategic priority for Hampshire, then that dialogue is open and transparent, and that's there. So there was an understanding of why this was needed because of the limitation of storage, but actually very comfortable because of the partnership that they have with Hampshire.
Thank you.
Super, thanks. Jonathan and Rod, any comment from you? No? Oh. All good? All good?
Nothing to add.
No. Okay. I think we're all good there. The recommendations for the Cultural Trust and the updated collections development policy. And in paragraphs 2A and 2B on page 43 of our agenda. I'm very happy to agree those. Thanks, Emma. Thanks everybody for working on that one. And so item number 4 is the draft regional transport strategy, our consultation response. That's back to Gary and Frank, I think.
Yeah, I'm just going to pass this straight to Frank, Leader.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Leader. This is a report simply to agree the response to the draft regional transport strategy that has been produced by Transport for the South East. For members' information, Transport for the South East is what's called a shadow subnational transport body, which means it doesn't have statutory status. We are a member, however, and one of the roles that we require Transport for South East to perform for us is to write a regional transport strategy. The details of our response are in the report. Thank you.
Super. Thanks very much. I think it's all quite straightforward. Adrian, any comment?
Just one question, if I may. On paragraph 13 of the main report, the second bullet there refers to, this is items which we're flagging up, and the second of those is A326 and bringing A34 to motorway standard. Questions on both of those. The A326, is this with a view to enabling things like Dibden Bay in the future by giving them a connection to the strategic road network that has the capacity that Dibden Bay would need? If not, what is that for? And the A34 to motorway standard, anybody who's travelled on the A34, I think, would immediately recognise that it's a dreadful road and can understand the amount of traffic on it, that's something that would be desirable from a driving point of view. But I think we've learnt in the past that more roads you build, then the more traffic fills them up, and you just get problems then cropping up on other roads. So I'd welcome comments on both of those points.
Okay, so the A326 is currently a large local major scheme that we're advancing at this moment in time through a business case process, which has been itself a discussion at several decision day meetings. It was not mentioned within the regional transport strategy, and all we're seeking to do here is to highlight the fact that it is a significant scheme that has been left out of the strategy and should be put back in.
So we're not adding more by this? We're not suggesting that more be added to what we're currently planning?
No, not that has already been through decision days and is well in the public domain. As to the A34, it's been a long-standing position of the County Council that the A34 is deficient in a number of ways, the slip roads, some of the junctions, etc., in terms of standards. And all we're seeking to do here is to reflect a long-term position which was not, again, listed in the regional transport strategy as a local issue that we would like to see addressed at some point by National Highways who operate the road, and to get Transport for South East to effectively back Hampshire up on its request to improve the standard of the A34.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, generally on the consultation response, there's a lot of good stuff in there. I was pleased to see Blackwater Valley Rail Network as mentioned as an option there. I hope one day we can achieve it. It's only been 40 years so far, but we'll get there in the end. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Adrian. Malcolm.
Yeah, paragraph 18 talks about a 10% traffic reduction by 2050. I thought our goal, I thought our LTP talks about 10% by 2030.
No, I can categorically say that it's 2050. And that's in the evidence base for LTP4.
Right, I shall go and have a look.
I was waiting. I wasn't sure whether there was another question coming or not. Malcolm. So, John.
No, okay.
No. Jonathan Rod.
Happy to pick it up.
No, I'm happy, and I think anything that improves the A34 is good news for local residents.
And can I agree, because I'd like to do this with Councillor Collett about Blackwater Valley. Okay, let's focus on that when we get the first chance.
Yep.
Okay.
I think it's something for which you might end up lobbying the mayor rather than the rest of us, but we'll see. Zoe.
No other comments. Thank you, Leader.
No, all good. So everyone, if we're all okay with that, no further questions. The recommendation is in paragraph 2 on page 73 for this one, and I'm very happy to support that. Frank, thanks so much for the work on this one. Now, the final item number 5 on the agenda is in respect of cycling and walking infrastructure plans, but one of those is for Test Valley North, and so both as a local member in Test Valley and also as a cabinet member.
So what I can answer to that is that actually we're regularly monitoring how well we're doing in securing funding, and I can confirm that in the last few weeks we've been told that we have secured a further £5 million for active travel infrastructure in Hampshire, which complements investments of a similar amount that have happened in the last few years. So what we're seeing through this investment is actually that government are making good on the work that we've done and are starting to fund some of the infrastructure. We're not there yet on the ground with building lots of great stuff. We've got some really good stuff going on, but the change that we need to make is a kind of a generational thing, and these plans kind of set up that ambition. It's not only government that we get funding from, it's also developers. So by having these plans in place, we do have a list of schemes which developers can look at, and we can attach to negotiations with them about what they should be funding as well. So it's a really good way of getting ahead of the game.
Thank you.
Councillor Wallace.
My repeated comment that I wish we didn't call this a plan. I wish we called it a strategy or something like that, because it's not a plan, because we never actually deliver anything on it, or we don't at this point deliver anything on it. But that's just a comment. It does mislead our residents when we talk about it as a plan, because they think actually we're going to start delivering these things as soon as it's complete, and we know that that's not the case.
Thank you. Councillor Glenn and Cooper.
Yeah, I'm pleased to see this LC whip coming forward. It hopefully long term will improve cycling and walking and people's health, more importantly, and that's got to be a positive move. So thank you. Yeah, no, I'm quite happy.
Thank you. The important thing is the LC whips need to keep in the public and the councillor's eye. We need to keep increasing our wish list, which means continue work in the background, so that when we get development being proposed for any part of Hampshire, we're ready with a scheme. And we need to be able to get our hands on any 106 or SIL money that's available to help provide the cash for us to proceed with what we want. And as was mentioned earlier, that means we're ahead of the game and not fighting to catch up. I cite in particular Junction 5, or really any junction on our motorways, which the government, and I'm talking about the Labour government, sees as what we would call a development hub, a hub worthy of development of whatever they think would be worthy that should be developed. And we need to be ready. We need to be ready. We're talking potentially millions of pounds, and the LC whips need to be there to get their fair share. Thank you.
Frank, any additional comments?
No, not from me.
I agree with all of that, and I think when we talk about this and accessibility, it is about having those available walking and cycle routes accessible for now or development in the future. But that's obviously one part of it, and I think Councillor Glenn, you were right. Some of it is changing that mindset for people then to be able to start accessing them. But this is the first stage of development, and we also obviously know that the secondary and third impact of having this accessibility on health and well-being, active travel, you know, joining communities. And we've, like I said, we've talked about buses and roads, and this is one part of it, that maybe people have choice where they can do part of their journey walking and cycling, and the other part of their journey catching buses or a short car journey. So therefore, I'm happy to support the recommendation. Thank you. I think if we can now bring the leader back.
I'll just invite him. Thanks, Zoe.
Thank you for calling me back in.
Welcome back.
Yeah, I think I should drop out more often. Clearly, you did that much more efficiently than any of the other numbers and the other items. So we've now reached the end of the public part of our decision day. So I need to read the formal notice to exclude the press and public before asking that the webcast is ended, because we've got a couple of items that we now need to cover that are confidential. I move that the public be excluded from this decision day during the following item of business, as it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during this item, there would be disclosure to them of exempt information within paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972, and further that in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemptions outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information for the reasons set out in the report. So, Louise, could we please stop the webcast? And thank you for watching if you